I'd like to start this morning by thanking you all for being here today and for participating in the way that you have in this exercise. Personally, I find it both very stimulating and uplifting, really, to be in a room full of people who understand the importance of a well-functioning innovation system in Australia, understand the problems that we face, and understand and care deeply about developing solutions to those problems. Because as we've heard repeatedly today, research, development and innovation not only essential, but they're probably the only pathway to effectively address our productivity challenges and to reverse the fall in our standard of living and secure our future prosperity. And somebody who cared deeply about those issues was Ralph Slatyer. So it's now my pleasure to introduce the 2024 Ralph Slatyer Address on Science and Society. The address is named in honour of Australia's first Chief Scientist and is presented annually by Cooperative Research Australia in honour of Professor Slatyer's role in the creation of the Cooperative Research Centres and his outstanding contributions to Australian science and society. And each year we invite a speaker who contributes to the nation in the spirit of Ralph Slatyer's work. We're honoured to be joined today by members of the Slatyer family. June and her partner Malcolm and Tony, a very warm welcome to all of you. And I'd also like to acknowledge the support of our partner, the Department of Industry, Science and Resources for this event. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce Dr Cathy Foley AO, PSM, Australia's 9th Chief Scientist, to give the address. She commenced her role in January 2021, following an extraordinary career at CSIRO. Dr Foley, appointed as CSIRO's Chief Scientist in 2018, was only the second woman to hold this prestigious position. Her career began with a PhD at Macquarie University, where her groundbreaking semiconductor research laid the foundation for investigations in light-sensitive devices, including LEDs now used in households worldwide. During her tenure at CSIRO, Dr Foley made remarkable contributions to superconducting technology, and her team's most celebrated achievement, the LAND-TEM sensor system, has revolutionised mineral exploration by detecting valuable underground deposits, including nickel, silver and gold, leading to discoveries worth over $6 billion. But beyond her technical contributions at CSIRO, she also spearheaded strategic initiatives like the Quantum Technology Roadmap for Australia and championed scientific advancements to drive economic growth and resilience. She was, therefore, an obvious and widely applauded choice for the role as Australia's Chief Scientist, which she commenced almost 4 years ago. She's since then undertaken an astonishing array of work. It encompasses developing policies and strategies such as the National Science and Research Priorities released earlier this year. It has included providing advice to government on everything from cybersecurity and AI to vaccine development, critical minerals, quantum technologies, climate change, and open access to research. She has led and participated in national and global scientific dialogues, and along the way she has sought to educate and inform the community. Clearly, Cathy, I think you must have a body double to manage such a diverse and jam-packed agenda. More recently, Dr Foley released a report that makes the case for free access to academic journal articles for all Australians. Her model would also provide free access for anyone, anywhere in the world to journal articles with an Australian-based lead author. Her advice to government, advice on open access models, unlocking knowledge for national benefit, supports what her research has shown, that increasing access to the research literature, much of which is generally behind paywalls, can unlock great benefits for Australia, and that access to trusted information is fundamental to social cohesion, especially at a time when misinformation is proliferating. Dr Foley's leadership and scientific excellence have earned her numerous accolades, including an Order of Australia, fellowships with the Australian Academy of Science and the Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering, and honours such as the Women's Agenda Leadership Award and the Clooney's Ross Medal. She's been a trailblazer in inspiring more women into STEM and fostering diversity in the science and research sector, and her vision for creating an inclusive environment that unlocks the full potential of all people is an enduring model for progress. In the following 2024 Ralph Slatyer Address, Dr Foley will reflect on her 4-year term as Australia's Chief Scientist, which comes to an end this year. She will offer her thoughts on some of the shifts in thinking necessary to realise Australia's innovation ambitions. Notably, this is Dr Foley's last scheduled major speech in Canberra, which is fitting because she's rounding off her term at the place where she began, the Press Club. There could be no more fitting person to provide an address in honour of our first Chief Scientist, Ralph Slatyer, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr Cathy Foley.
So thank you so much, Patricia, for that really overwhelmingly lovely introduction. I'm exhausted just listening to it, and I'm sure that it sounds a lot when you put it all into a short space of time, but 4 years is a long time. But I also want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we're meeting on today, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to them and to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in the audience today. And also, I'm sorry I missed it this morning because I was a tad late, but I just wanted to acknowledge also Auntie Violet, who kicked off today. She's welcomed me to so many events around Canberra over the time I've been in this role. And it's something which I guess really resonates with me, as you'll see later on, because one of the things I'm pleased to have been part of as Australia's Chief Scientist is the recognition of Indigenous systems as a valuable part of the broader science and research system, with over 65,000 years of understanding to offer. But I'll say a little bit more about that later. I also want to pay tribute to Ralph Slatyer. I understand, and I know I had some sandwiches with his life partner, June, and her partner, Malcolm, and son, Tony, who are in the audience today. Ralph Slatyer also had 2 daughters, Beth, who's unable to be here today, and Judy, who I spoke with last week as I prepared for today. Judy reminded me that before he became Chief Scientist, Ralph was the ambassador to UNESCO, where he not only developed a tremendous understanding of how to navigate difficult issues, but he was able to learn from the approaches to innovation in different countries. He became Australia's Chief Scientist when Bob Hawke was promoting the clever country, and Australia was weak on commercialisation, but had great science and research. And for Ralph, the key was collaboration. This is all sounding rather familiar. So coming together around critical ideas that had the potential to shape the future, that was what he was all about. He was proud of his work to raise the profile of science and government, and of his own research that was a foundation and often highly cited work in understanding plant-soil relationships. But far and away, the thing he was most proud of was establishing the Cooperative Research Centres. The CRC program is an extraordinary legacy and remains an important part of our innovation system 30 years later. Tanya Munro talked about this importance of the photonics CRC to her career when she delivered this address, and I think many of us in science have a CRC story. Mine was the AMET CRC for mineral exploration technologies in the 1990s. One of the things that struck me while I was speaking with Judy was the way she described her father as completely solutions-focused, always looking to work with and include others to solve issues in the interests of our country. And if he ran into a problem, the question he asked was, how do we focus on this and how do we solve it? And I completely relate to this. I have tended to see the challenges and problems I've dealt with in my science career and in this job in the same way. If it's not prevented by the laws of physics, I think it should be solvable. As you probably know, I finished my term in a couple of weeks. You've probably heard this multiple times. It feels like it's been the Johnny Farnham farewell tour. But this is my last major speech, as Patricia said, in Canberra, and it is giving me a chance to reflect on the last 4 years. And it's fitting to be back here in the National Press Club, where I did speak for my first major speech in this role in April 2021. It was televised and the media was sitting front and centre, and so it's safe to say I was a little more nervous then than I am today. And I want to just say thank you again for the warm welcome. As I end my term, I return, let's say strengthened, by 4 years at the pointy end where science meets government. And I've learned so much. And I want to be frank as I share some of that today. But before I do, I'm going to give away the punchline, because while I intend to be upfront about what I think needs to change, my conclusion will not be that the system is broken. My conclusion will reflect my inbuilt optimism about Australia's future as an innovation nation, an optimism strengthened by the goodwill, energy and shared ambition that I have encountered everywhere that I've gone during my term. But first, when I spoke here in 2021, I talked about the Olympic relay team, where the Japanese team surprised the world to win silver by focusing on intense detail on the baton transfer. They worked out how to pass the baton between runners with maximum efficiency and avoid losing precious microseconds in the handover. I like this analogy because I'm a runner. I also liked it because it's how I've gone about my work. If something's not working as hoped, I tend to undo the pieces and drill down to the detail, lay it all out on the workbench and take a close look at each part of the machine, working as best I can, and then I think about how to fit them together for maximum impact. It won't surprise you to hear that when I was a child, my room was full of bits and pieces of hairdryers and crystal radio sets taken apart and maybe not always put back together the right way. It's amazing I've actually still got all my fingers and toes when I look at what I got up to when I was playing around with my dad's toolbox. I love this process of investigating how things work. And that's what I've aimed to do as Chief Scientist. Take a look at some of those foundational pieces of the system and see whether things can be done differently with better efficiencies and impact. One of those pieces is how best to measure success in the research sector. And I'm looking forward to releasing a report with a new framework on this topic soon. At the moment, the measures of success are skewing outcomes. The focus on papers and citations incentivises wrong kinds of behaviour. First author status, publish or perish, internal competition rather than cooperation. And this makes it harder for younger researchers or people from different backgrounds to get their feet on the ground. It's harder than it should be for new ideas and experimental approaches to get support. There's not sufficient recognition of time spent outside universities, for example in industry. I believe new ways of measuring success in research careers will help rebalance the system in ways that free up researchers to focus on what matters, following the evidence where it leads and testing a new idea. Curiosity, collegiality and flexible career pathways that don't disadvantage people for time in industry or government or time out looking after children. As you heard, I've also been working on improving access to research literature. My advice to the Australian government was released in August, and before I finish up, I will hand over further advice on possible implementation approaches to the government's strategic examination of research and development, which is looking at how to incentivise greater spending on R&D in the business sector. This is the culmination of 4 years of work for me, and I kept plugging away at it because I believe open access to research literature would deliver real benefits to Australia. You probably don't need me to explain why when you consider that many of the people who need to know the latest science and research and what it says, including people in investing in emerging technologies, but also teachers and students, health professionals, citizen scientists, public servants, and many others, don't have access without paying. The science is locked behind paywalls and university subscriptions. I want to see easier, universal access, which will increase productivity and create competition. It will accelerate the process by which discovery makes its way into innovations that will change the way we live our lives and solve our greatest challenges. The shift to open access is unstoppable, and even as my term as Chief Scientist ends, I will continue to take a keen interest. Research infrastructure is another piece of the puzzle. The term research infrastructure covers a wide range of equipment used for science and research. But I'm thinking here about the pieces of very complex kit that require foresight, planning, and a lot of money. One example getting attention at the moment is the question of how we provide sufficient data centres and the energy to run them to meet the surge in demand from AI and high-performance computing. This is a challenge that will start to bite in just a couple of years, impacting our ability to make the most that AI has to offer. Quantum computing is another example, and there are examples in the research translation infrastructure that's needed for medtech, clean energy technologies, and other areas like semiconductor manufacturing, and not to mention the infrastructure for fundamental science projects such as in astronomy. The infrastructure is expensive and complex, and these are just a few examples, but they give you a flavour of the future thinking that is needed to ensure we're preparing for technologies that are coming over the horizon, and we have the kit and the capability we need. This is a fast-changing space. The National Science and Research Council, the National Science and Technology Council has initiated a project to look at these questions, and it will be for the next Chief Scientist to consider that with the Council. A fourth focus for me has been the recognition of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge systems. We're making real strides here. The ATSI Traditional Knowledge Innovation Award is going into its third year. It highlights the depth that Indigenous knowledge brings to the table for a better understanding of our continent and its rich biodiversity, just to name one aspect. The Prime Minister's Prizes for Science will add an Indigenous category next year. And I'm very pleased that the National Science and Technology Council is going to play a part in implementing the new science priority concerning Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge systems with the help of Professor Reuben Bolt, the first Indigenous member of the Council. I describe this as a foundational piece of Australia's science and research system because it is just that. With the generosity of Indigenous peoples and an approach that is Indigenous-led, there is a trove of information that represents a comparative advantage for Australia and will drive new innovation. These are just a few of the things that I've been working on, but they're only part of the puzzle. When you take the innovation ecosystem apart to look at the pieces closely, you find other things that are not working as well as they should be. We do not have enough investment in research and development, and as I said earlier, there's now a task force with a mission to turn this around. We do not invest enough in fundamental science, and unfortunately, PhD scholarships are still below the minimum wage. We do not have a nationally coordinated way to support all research infrastructure and international research engagement. We do not have porous enough connections between different parts of the system, research, industry and government. We lack patience. We are too quick to abandon programs without giving them time to work. We do not have a sufficient tolerance of risk, and we do not easily embrace new ideas. We're too quick to criticise and too often retreat to the safe corner to admire the problem instead of taking courage in hand to try something new. That's quite a list. Today, I want to focus on those last two issues: how to create the time and space to let things work, and how to develop an ecosystem that embraces new ways of doing things so that we become a country not just of great discovery science, but of great experimentation and innovation. There's an obvious tension in those two ideas, patience on one hand and experimentation on the other, but they're both essential parts of the system, and it's important to get the balance right. First, to my contention that we are too quick to chop and change. For those of us in the science and research sector, patience is almost inbuilt. We're used to a very long runway because it takes decades, sometimes much longer, for discoveries to work their way into new capabilities. Right now, the world is on the cusp of incredible new technologies based on quantum science and AI. But you can trace this, and the quantum science one, you can trace back to more than 200 years to the moment that light was discovered to be both a particle and a wave. This discovery is the heart of quantum physics, and it's given rise to pretty much everything in my working life. Gravitational waves, ripples of the very fabric of the universe, were detected just a few years ago in 2015. But that measurement was the culmination of an effort that began 100 years ago when Einstein first predicted their existence. As you heard before, an example from my own research, I did some seminal work on nitride semiconductors in the early 1980s. 15 years later, that led to the invention of white light LEDs in Japan. So as scientists, we have deep memories, and we know that it's good to stay the course. No one can ever be quite sure what will come from scientific endeavour. It's unpredictable, full of twists and turns, sometimes dead ends, and sometimes sudden advances, and always long in the tooth when you look closely. But we know that something will bubble up, given enough time and effort. And yet our history of programs aimed at shifting the dial on complexity, innovation, and entrepreneurialism in Australia is a history of impatience. There are notable exceptions, and the CRC program is one of them. But too often, initiatives are abandoned too quickly. So let me give you an example. This will be showing our age here, but some of you may remember the GERD scheme in the 1980s. GERD stands for Grants for Industry, Research and Development. This was a scheme designed to boost industry spend on R&D. And I have to say we must dance in circles here because it offered non-dilutive funds to take a recent breakthrough to industry applications faster. My work at CSIRO in high-temperature superconductivity was funded by those grants. We worked with 3 companies on biomedical applications with Nucleus, with new electronics with AWA, and steelmaking with BHP. We managed to create a superconducting device called a SQUID that could detect holes of 1 centimetre or greater in steel. Look, I know you think that's absolutely ridiculous, and if you've got 1 centimetre hole in steel, you certainly don't need a quantum device to see it. But BHP was interested in the technology for minerals exploration rather than detecting defects in steel, and that's the direction we went. Eventually, we developed LandTem for the detection of deeply buried ore bodies undercover, which you heard about from Patricia. And that's the innovation process. An interesting idea that gets more interesting as the science develops. Consideration of where the science might have application in the real world. Putting out feelers to test who might want to fund it and where it might be commercially useful. And then the long process of getting it to work in the field. None of it is easy, and it's fields of tears, I think you'd have to say. And none of it happens by magic. And an outcome like we achieved is by no stretch guaranteed. It might just have easily have ended up back in the CSIRO in a tea room drumming up a new idea for superconductivity if it didn't work. And the GERD scheme was an important part of our success, but it lasted 5 years. The GERD program was a victim of impatience, and what a waste. Too often we set up a program and then expect it to deliver overnight. And yet high-temperature superconductivity, the photonics industry, and laser industry, to name just a few, were all funded by the GERD program, and it only came to fruition 15 years or more after the program was discontinued. We'd be better placed to achieve our goals if we give things time. As an example, the new programs in place now offer good end-to-end innovation for the first time. University researchers can access the ON program to create a startup. Startups can use the Australian Economic Accelerator to create their proof of concept. And then there's the Industry Growth Program to create prototypes to the point where they're investable. And finally, the National Reconstruction Fund for scale-up. Some things are not quite there yet. More clarity is needed about how non-dilutive funds can be accessed by industry to support what Mary O'Kane, the former New South Wales Chief Scientist and Engineer, calls applied fundamental research, which industry says it needs. And we still need to get the settings right to shift the dial on business investment in R&D, as I said. But once the systems are in place, the important thing is to give them time to bed down, time to iron out the wrinkles, to build awareness, and to allow investors and others to feel confident that the supports are in place and will stay the course. This applies to individual projects, which also need patience over decades. I always like to think of big projects as children. We love them when they're babies. We keep care on them and lots of attention. But by the time they become teenagers, it gets difficult. You need to bite your tongue, find the love, and look for ways to help them through what can be difficult years for the whole family. Similarly, the teenage years of a project are a nightmare. Every project I've been involved with has had an adolescent moment. For any teenagers in the room, I can't see too many of them, and my own children who might hear this, please don't take this the wrong way because you all are lovely. But then when your children grow up and leave school, it's when they need money. So it's a difficult time, kind of hard work, until finally they emerge and become independent. They begin to add value and the world sees them for those wonderful humans you always knew them to be. It's a quarter-century journey that takes patience and commitment. I'm far from the first person to say that the system, we need to give the system time to work. My predecessor, Alan Finkel, made the same point in his work on the energy transition. His mantra was, be ambitious, be patient. So I want to add something else to the mix, sort of a little bit of rock and roll, a little bit of country to Alan's rock and roll. I want to add belief. Belief in ourselves as a nation. Faith that our goals are achievable. It feels unusual to be using words like faith and belief as Australia's chief scientist or a scientist full stop, but there it is. What do I mean by this? I mean it's one thing to have an ambition. It's another to believe that the ambition is achievable and that we're up to the task. It takes a leap of faith to know we can build a quantum computer that was such a crazy idea just 2 decades ago. We can become a country powered by clean energy with net zero emissions using PV invented here. We can produce the export green steel to the world and transform our transport system to electric power. These ambitions are not simply aspirations, New Year's resolutions or badges we pin on our jacket to show that we're one of the good guys. They're real goals that we can achieve. For Australia, this requires a cultural change, a shift in the nation we imagine ourselves to be. Cultural change is hard, perhaps especially in a country like ours where we have so much to protect. Our tendency is to resist change and its advantages. We guard our prosperity, our lifestyle, our institutions, and our freedom well. But it has its disadvantages. It risks stifling creativity and creating vanilla outcomes. We can create a real inertia when it comes to tackling difficult things. I'm not entirely sure where the balance point should sit, but I don't think we have this right at the moment. I don't think we can truly become innovative, high-tech manufacturing nation powered by clean energy that we aspire to be until we can imagine ourselves as that nation and then take a leap into developing technologies that are new to us, or if we're not sure where the exact outcome will be, know that they will come. We can think of it like a young person taking that leap of imagination to see themselves in a future career, which is the necessary starting point to embarking on the slog to get there. It's often easier to retreat into inaction. But if we retreat when it comes to clean energy, hedging our bets about new forms of energy or whether to go in one direction or another, we risk being left behind. If we prefer to wait and see how things shake down in other countries who do the hard work on advanced semiconductor manufacturing or bioengineering, we miss out on an enormous opportunity that leverages Australia's strengths. If we continue to be risk-averse, for example, on sharing data, we will stymie the possibilities in health and societal planning. And if we drum our fingers and wonder when to make a move on circular economy, we play it safe, but only at the expense of yet another opportunity of transformation. Instead of fearing the consequences of AI, robotics, or automation and new forms of energy, we need to back ourselves and know that we can harness these technologies to make a better life for ourselves and our children. This is all the more important now that there is so much uncertainty about the trajectory of other nations on clean energy and emerging technologies. We need to be prepared to step up and lead, to question things that we have taken for granted, or ingrained habits we have, or even things we think are sacrosanct. The contest of ideas is not always a comfortable arena, but that's where the gold lies. Of course, this is more difficult than the word suggests, and sometimes I feel lucky that my wheelhouse is in science and technology and research. As I said, from where I sit, the only thing that can get in the way are the laws of physics. One of my favourite experiments at high school was a demonstration of parabolic motion. You roll a ball down an incline and then let it fly off the table edge, and the physics part was to determine where it would land. We held up a board to mark where the ball would hit as it sailed through the air, and then made other measurements as the ball got closer to the ground. Using these data points, we were able to predict where the ball would land every time and put the paper cup in the right place to catch it. What we had developed was an equation for parabolic motion that holds true for any ball, any object travelling in space anywhere. A predictive equation that told us what was going to happen in the future from something as seemingly unpredictable as a roll of the ball. For me as a school student, I could have faith that the calculations would hold and the ball would always land in the cup. That was a pivotal moment for me. It was the first time I saw the power of physics to predict what would happen. And after that, physics for me was unstoppable. This is an illustration of what I mean by taking a leap of faith. Not a wild stab with no evidence to back you, but a mindset that says trust the foundations, trust the science and the systems that have been set up to drive innovation, trust the calculations, and then take a leap of faith. Plunge into the wild teenage years knowing that we will get through them and they'll be worth it. I started by saying I would end on an optimistic note, so this is it. I truly believe we can achieve the goals we have for our economy and society over the next quarter century. That's because I heard a remarkable unanimous vision for Australia when I travelled the country last year, leading the national conversation that informed the new science and research priorities on behalf of the government. It's because I know we have the smarts, the deep expertise that has grown out of the strength of our university system and the research institutions such as CSIRO. Am I confident that we will let go of the things that hold us back, our habits, inertial systems, and fears of new technologies? Well, because Christmas trees are out and the lights are coming up and it's near Christmas and my term is coming to an end in a few weeks, I'm going to say yes. I'll make that leap of faith. I've had an extraordinary 4 years. I've discovered the enormous convening power of the role of the chief scientist. It's an extraordinary, privileged position. People answer my emails and they're willing to drop everything and support me even when I ask for help. I told you about my childhood pastime of taking things apart to work out how the different pieces worked. As chief scientist, I've been lucky enough to have the backing of the whole science and research system, the innovation system, the public service, industry and government, all of those people to help me put the pieces together again. I'm proud of what we've done, and I really want to say thank you to everyone for your incredible support and leave you with this final thought. And that is, by working together across our sectors and our boundaries, by collaborating, taking risks, and being patient, we can be and make Australia the country we want to be. Thank you very much.